And it's my pleasure to present Jan Dusík, the Deputy Director-General of DG CLIMA. And I'll say a few words so that you know a bit about his background. So Jan has spent his entire career in the environmental and climate policy and law field. He worked at the Ministry of the Environment of the Czech Republic for 12 years, including as the Minister of Environment in 2009-10. In 2011, he became the Deputy Regional Director of the United Nations Environment Programme and was subsequently appointed as UNEP's Regional Director for Europe, followed by serving as UNEP's Principal Advisor on Strategic Engagement for the Arctic and Antarctic. In 2020, Jan joined the WWF Global Arctic Programme, leading the work on Arctic sustainable development and governance. And in 2022 to 2024, he held the position of the Czech government envoy for international climate negotiations. And in September 2024, he was appointed Deputy Director General in DG Climate Action of the European Commission. Perhaps also interesting to note that Jan holds a doctorate in law, which is not a PhD, I learned, but a doctorate in law from Charles University in Prague, and holds a Master also of Science from the University of Oxford and the Environmental Change Institute. So he also has a little bit of an academic background, who makes him the perfect speaker. But obviously he's speaking in his current capacity as Deputy Director General. I'm also very glad that Jan is very interested and eager to engage in discussion. So the time hopefully will be roughly divided by half with his presentation. Afterwards, we hope for a lively debate, which I'm very glad to moderate. Jan, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Sebastian for introduction. Thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts. And as said, I would be very happy to hear your thoughts and your reflections, because in the European Commission we tend to be in our own bubble more than we want, and it is useful to have conversations with different stakeholders, and definitely the academics are for us a very important stakeholder, sounding board, source of information and knowledge, and this is a welcome opportunity to be with you today. We are one of the smaller Directorates General in the Commission, relatively new, and we have a very cross-cutting agenda going to many directions of the work of the Commission. We know that the climate change is a phenomenon that every day reminds us how serious the situation is, how climate is changing, and how it is causing negative impacts around the world. And this does not go away with any new crises that we have, be it economic, be it security, migration, whatever you can add on the headlines of the media. So the climate crisis is still there. It is serious. It is something that we are seeing further and further away. The prospect of being able to achieve the Paris Agreement milestone of 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. Nevertheless, because it is there and because it is a subject which is in the media and is being reminding citizens that there are new evidences of climate change, there's a certain fatigue in the population. People don't want to hear another bad news about an iceberg that is melting, or about floods in another part of the world, or even in the neighboring village, landslides in Switzerland, burying villages. These are all news that are coming, and they are, after a certain point, people build a certain barrier against these headlines. So it is increasingly challenging to communicate where we are going, what needs to happen, and what is the obligation that we all have to reduce the impact of climate change to the minimum. And what I sometimes say is that the planet will survive. It will survive climate change. It will adapt. nature will adapt. Some species will disappear. New species may appear. It will be a massive shift, but the nature will adapt as well. Who might not adapt is the people. The people will not be able to live the lives they're used to. Some will be able to adapt. Some will not be able to live anymore in the conditions. There's some places in the world will be as hot as it will be impossible to live on. So making this a realization that we don't do it because of the polar bear who is losing the piece of ice to stand on, but it is about people who will lose their livelihoods or their jobs in the agriculture sector, or will be facing new diseases. These are, in our view, the things that resonate better than just talking about the planet and ecosystems and our obligation to act on it. The climate crisis is not only continuing to exist with the other crises, but it is also an accelerator, and it is a cascading crisis that we are seeing. So climate change can aggravate security risks. It can bring in migration, strife for raw materials, for energy, for water. The Commission has just adopted the water resilience strategy, by the way, which speaks a lot about where we need to direct our efforts. And it is also about the economic security and economic competitiveness. And this is all in the context of a very dynamic geopolitical and geoeconomic space. We see what's happening with the politics from the US administration, where every morning I'm listening in to hear what kind of new announcements President Trump has made overnight, shocking everyone around the world. It is also the competition that China is performing, and that is again combined with what's happening in the United States is a piece of uncertainty about how the trade relations, how the economic cooperation and competition in the world will evolve. So we live in that space, and that's an additional kind of framing of where we need to operate. And this is what you get also from when you read the strategies that the Commission is producing nowadays. It started with the political priorities of Ursula von der Leyen in the beginning of her second term, going through the competitiveness compass, going through the clean industrial deal, and also the dialogues that are convened with different parts of the European economy, the discussions around the strategic reports like the Letta and Draghi reports. These all have a dimension of decarbonization and need to get to climate neutrality. And I would argue that one big reason why we are able to stay the course on climate action is that back in 2019, the leaders agreed to that we want to be a climate neutral continent by 2050. And this is a commitment that has been adopted by all leaders. And this is the basis of the European climate law and the legislation that follows the climate law. So we are also basing ourselves on that commitment, and we are seeing, so how can we combine the climate action corresponding to climate neutrality with the current challenges that are for the economy, for the people living in Europe. We have a war that is happening in the European continent that people are afraid of, and that has consequences such as the high prices of energy, and how we can provide responses to this combination of challenges, and how actually moving forward steadily with decarbonization is for the benefit of the people and of the economy in Europe. In the center of the European climate action, or reducing the emissions, is the emission trading system that has existed for 20 years, that is gradually being enlarged. It has brought down the emissions over those 20 years by 50%. It has collected 200 billion euros for decarbonization. So this is a major achievement. And when we talk with politicians, stakeholders, people in Europe, we say, well, it's not just Europe doing it. Nowadays, you have around the world more than 70 different carbon pricing systems, which work on the basis that the best way to address the emission reductions is through economic instrument and ideally through emission trading, where you reduce the emissions where it makes most economic sense. So you can see a proliferation of systems which were to an extent inspired by what we have designed in Europe, and we are extending this system now into further areas. Now with an ETS1, so-called, that started with energy, going through industry, going through the aviation and maritime, and moving from 2027 to so-called ETS2, which will target the housing and transportation sectors. And that's something which is sensitive. It's tangible for everyday lives of people. They can see it directly when they go to a gas station, or where they get their bill for the gas where which they use at home. So this is a sensitive moment. It comes together with the Social Climate Fund, which will basically use the revenues of the whole system together with the other parts of the ETS to look at the needs of vulnerable parts of the population. But it is a sensitive one. We can see, and we have the figures and results corresponding to that. The implementation works. I mentioned the ETS, the reduction of emissions. 2 weeks ago, the Commission has published the assessment of the national energy and climate plans, which each of the member states of the EU adopted. And we are seeing that if we bring all of those together, we get to something a little bit more than 54% of emissions reductions by 2030. So just short of the 55% target. So in spite of all that's happening, we can see that the regulation works, that the member states have concrete plans which are investment plans that will bring us all the way to the 2030 target, and that allows also to look beyond 2030. Because one thing that when we have discussions with the businesses is, of course, in principle they want to have the maximum economic benefit. They understand that there is some public goods, and the climate change is, or climate is a public good. But they say, okay, so if we have to comply with the regulation, for us, it is important to set the target, to set it well in advance, and then to keep to that target, and not to be changing the course every 2 years and creating uncertainty, punishing those who have already started to act. We need that credibility, we need that predictability, early notice, and we will be able to adapt. We will change our economic models. We will make it part of our economic cycle. So this goes hand in hand with our perception. If we have the milestone of 2050 and now 2040, that's something that gives the predictability to the businesses. So we will be proposing in 2 weeks' time the target of 90% reductions by 2040. We are still fine-tuning the exact parameters of it, but it is clear that this is something which is based on the scientific advice, which is based on economic models, and which is based also on the achievability of the action that we have seen through our impact assessments. So this will be proposed. It needs then to be discussed and agreed by the member states and by the European Parliament. And with that, we would then go to the Belém conference COP30 with the nationally determined contribution that will basically transcribe this goal into our international commitment. The commitment for the NDC, so-called NDC, is for 2035. So our plan is to basically translate the figure of 2040 through a linear connection with the 2030 target. So if we are talking about 2040, you would get something like 72.5%, the midpoint for 2035 as an indicative target. But we, in the European climate law, we have the target of 2040, which we are obliged to propose, and we will propose at the 90% level. Now, of course, the other thing that we are hearing quite often is, why should Europe be taking so much action and reducing its economic capacity by reducing emissions when the rest of the world is not doing anything? Well, the first thing is, I would argue that it's not that the rest of the world is not doing anything. And I would even argue that the fact that Donald Trump has announced on his first day that the US will withdraw from the Paris Agreement does not mean that all the climate action will stop in the US. Again, talking to businesses who are operated or even headquartered in the US, they say, yes, we continue the action. Maybe we are less vocal about it because we don't want to provoke, but they see that for the global economic competitiveness picture, it is essential. It is something that is the course. It is a one-way street that they are committed to continue. It's going to be more difficult. The US will stop putting money into it. You will have to have G7 meetings talking about wildfires, but not being allowed to talk about why do we have wildfires. That's because of climate change. You have World Bank meetings that cannot have in the title the world's climate change, similar to gender and a few other irritants for the current US administration. So that's a reality, but the reality is that the caravan goes on, and it will go on, including the businesses and the subnational actors in the United States. More complicated, but continuing. And what we are trying to do, and what we are working with our partners around the world, is to show that the multilateralism works. Brazil, as the host of the next conference of parties, very keen to showcase that the Paris Agreement is alive. We want to see the next generation of these NDCs closing the gap between what is currently around 2.7 degrees centigrade towards as close as possible towards 1.5. We already know that it's not going to be as impressive as we would want and we would need, but we want to showcase that there is a movement and that there is progress and there is a joint determination to advance. We want to use the BELAM conference also for advancing or for presenting how far we have gone in the carbon pricing debate, how much experience and how much buy-in there is in the carbon pricing. The other side of the emission trading systems that looks outside of the EU is the so-called CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. And I always say it's the other side of the coin, where basically we want to make sure that we can decarbonize further. And in order to do that, we need the level playing field for the imports to the EU. We are seeing, of course, global partners pushing back, but we are also seeing that several global partners, including Brazil, are thinking of, okay, so we should probably design something like CBAM as well. If we have our ETS, we are regulating our industry. We want to protect also the level playing field from our end. So you can see that example from the EU is getting traction outside of the EU. We are doing our climate diplomacy is also centered around the carbon pricing tools and around mobilizing as ambitious as possible next generation of the NDCs. So this is essentially about what we do in the mitigation. When we have the 2040 target, we will then move into a next generation of the underlying legislation. We don't have a title yet, but it is basically like we had the Fit for 55. We will have something like Fit for 2040, but essentially extending the trajectory of our current legislation, learning from the lessons. We are saying, well, we know that some of the regulation that we do now is groundbreaking, and we may need to adjust the ways of doing it, being more efficient, like we do now with CBAM, where we have basically decreased the CBAM application by 90% of actors while maintaining 99.5% roughly of emissions. So these type of simplifications and raising effectiveness is feasible, is possible without undermining the targets. Of course, some people talk about simplification, but they mean the regulation, and we need to distinguish the two. On the other side of the equation, and coming back to what I said in the beginning about whether people will survive climate change, we are looking increasingly into adaptation and resilience, and we have in our political program the European Climate Adaptation Plan that will be both legislation and a strategy that will come next year, and we are now working with the member states across the Commission, with all the services, with the European Environment Agency on the basis of the EU climate risk assessment that was published last year. We are working on this new generation of legislation that will discuss things like the common temperature goal or common temperature reference scenario, not the goal. It's not our goal. It will discuss the risk ownership. It will discuss the institutional setup, the cooperation at the European level, and the key features that need to be the common framework for the EU. We are seeing so far a very good buy-in from the member states. So there is a demand for this pan-European approach to resilience. What we are trying to do, including in the discussions of the future budget of the EU, is making the climate resilience by design approach. So basically everything that we plan, every project that we do should think of being resilient to climate change, being ready for the fact that Europe as a continent is warming twice as fast as the global average, and having these features embedded in the way we are preparing for the future. Last point I would mention is the role of you. Obviously, we base the whole climate action on the science, and it has come with the growing body of science, and well, on the top sits the IPCC, but there is a whole global network of scientists that have looked into a complicated topic. It is complex, it is evolving, and the solutions are also complex. Basically, if we want to be somewhere close to 1.5 degrees by 2050, or to stick to the 1.5 degree, we need to take all the solutions. We need to reduce emissions in the first place. We need to look at nature-based solutions that will also help us become more resilient. We need to look at technological solutions. We need to be careful about some geoengineering solutions. So we are making a very clear distinction around things like the solar radiation modification or other enthusiastic projects that pop up in different places. Mitigation, reducing emissions must be the first point. If you have a flooding, the first thing you need to stop the water running. So this is our approach. We need the scientists to tell us how we are doing. What are the solutions? Innovation is a very important part. We know that we need to rely on solutions which are not yet readily available, either at scale or not at all. So there will be other solutions that will come on the way, and we need to basically use all the tools that we have, and this is the role of science to help with it as well. And of course, it is complicated to make that point from the science to people, and to translate a complex topic like climate change to ordinary citizens. What is it? How it is responding? What is the relationship between me switching off the light or switching from a gas boiler into photovoltaic panels, or the difference between taking a plane for my holiday or traveling by train? So these are the concrete stories, and it's difficult to draw the line sometimes, but we have to do it, because on the other side you have the populists, but you also have the targeted disinformation. And what is relatively new phenomenon, you used to have the pushback from the fossil fuel sectors. Now you have also the geopolitical pushback. And if you look at where these voices are coming from and what are the energy mixes and export features of these countries, it is very clear. So you can see that this is influencing the elections. You can see that this is influencing the media debates. It is very targeted to specific countries, concrete examples from the area of climate change. So we are together facing disinformation and populism, and we need to get it right. We have some tools. We are constantly learning how to adjust the tools, but being able to translate science into things that are understandable to ordinary citizens is a constant challenge. It is a constant challenge on climate, and I think we need to do even better to counter the disinformation and populism. So I'll leave it there for the opening, but very happy to have the discussion with you.
The scene, I think, for me, was very fascinating to see how you can, what fields you can cover in 25 minutes. It's amazing. Thanks a lot. So please.
Indeed, it is comforting that at least all of these fields are being worked on. So my question is related to the current discussion on the international credits for the 2040 target, and also in that relation to the 2035. Considering we briefly touched upon this in the first session about the advisory board's 2023 evaluation on a fair and feasible share that said that it was 90%, net 90% for the EU with additional external action, because 90 is not necessarily fair in the historic perspective, but feasible. And there should be then extra external action. Now the discussion is evolving around reaching the 90 by using external action for the 90. And I would like to, and they also reiterated, I noticed just early a few weeks ago that the advisory board does not believe in using the international credits. So if you could touch on that and what we're likely to see in 2 weeks' time, potentially, if there's going to be, like the PACM has the global mitigation outcomes where they cancel some of the effects, and maybe if they were used, the EU could also increase this cancellation to get above. But your input on that, thank you.
Thanks. Let's collect a few so that more people can get their questions updated too, indeed, and then we'll see.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. My question was, I heard in your presentation, in terms of incentives, you hear a lot of sticks, right, and not that many carrots. You hear about limits and regulations and compliance and basically compromises globally, right? Which of course are needed for this transition. But my question is, what about the carrots? And why carrots? I'm referring to investments in green infrastructure, supporting the improvement of the value chains globally, which we have heard during the day that's very important. And we have an instrument for that, which is the Global Gateway. So my very specific question would be, where does that stand in the priorities of the climate and sustainability external action of the Union? How are we putting that into that puzzle? Thanks.
And the third one.
Hi, and I know you have enough challenges with your member states, but since I'm from Norway, I just have to use the occasion to ask a question about Norway, because a couple of days ago, Norwegian Parliament agreed that in our NDC, we have our own NDC, we will no longer have a national target. We will have a climate target for 2035 in our NDC that we will meet together with the EU to reduce emissions with 70 to 75% in collaboration with the EU. But we are not part of the European climate law. So we have not adopted the governance regulation for the energy union and climate. So you do not have any sticks to make sure that we contribute. And the scientific board of the EU has not included Norway in their assessments when you now discuss the 2040 target. And no one in Norway has questioned whether this is fine with you, that we kind of agree that you should meet our target.
Okay, let's go back to Jan, and then and let's have another round after that, I hope.
Okay, I was told that I should not move with these microphones too far, so I'll sit down for this part. Very good questions. Thank you. On the international credits, yes, it is a hot topic, and we note that the scientific board has clearly said that it should be at least 90% domestic reduction, and we know that both the 2030 and the 2050 targets that the EU has are domestic. We will see. I cannot prejudge because the work is still ongoing. Let's see the exact text. What is clear is what is clear that if we go for international credits, there is a limited scope of how much that can be, how many of them will be available. We see that if we are going to use them, they need to be they need to be high price, high quality, high integrity. So there's certain qualifications, and they should not preempt the possibilities of the countries of origin to decarbonize. So basically, we cannot go with a Hoover to countries and say, well, we do all our decarbonization measures in your backyard. We will collect the emission reductions in our reporting, but then we leave them empty-handed for their own actions. So the international credits is something where we spent a lot of energy in the international negotiations on getting right the rules. It took many years, basically since the Paris Agreement was adopted. So now we have that set of rules, and we are looking into whether we will be also using those rules as other countries also for buying the credits, and if we do so, how to do it in a way that is just. In terms of the at least 90% and domestic, this is also part of a political judgment of the landscape. You mentioned that you work in the European Parliament, so you know the atmosphere in the Parliament has not become simpler since the last period. Let's put it that way. So we need the agreement on the climate law, where we can keep the ambition that is in line with Paris, that is in line with our climate neutrality target, and that we can get agreement on. So this will evolve when we discuss in the Council, in the Parliament. The kind of enabling conditions will probably evolve as well. But that's where we stand at the moment. Talking of investments, absolutely, this is also in the heart of the Clean Industrial Deal, that the idea is to find the means to finance both competitiveness and decarbonization, and how to reduce the energy prices is maybe the first thing, but also in terms of creating lead markets and creating economic cooperation globally that incentivizes decarbonization in both actions in Europe and in the rest of the world. And this is where it relates to our international partnerships. This is very much also embedded in the global gateway. There are the new instruments like clean trade industrial partnerships mechanism that we are just starting to pilot with South Africa. But there are bilateral agreements, free trade, trade defense instruments that we will be using with the same lens of decarbonization, because, as I said, no point in getting Europe from 6% of global emissions to zero if the remaining 94% remains unchanged. So this is also part and parcel of our climate diplomacy efforts. The EU and its member states. So we work very much with within the Team Europe spirit with our member countries, and also importantly, of course, the whole sphere of climate finance, which I didn't talk about, and how do we generate funding for climate action globally, both mitigation, adaptation. How do we generate private finance in complement of the public finance to have to find the trillions that are needed to deal with climate change. On the question of Norway being part of the climate legislation of the EU, obviously this is good that we are aligned in terms of the targets. I'm probably optimistic that Norway will do its share in reducing its own emissions of greenhouse gases at home. There's a separate story that is around how much fossil fuels Norway is supplying to Europe and other places through oil and gas. But as far as I have seen, there is a genuine effort to decarbonize. In Norway, the impressive growth in electric mobility that we are trying to catch up in Europe. I know that there is a limit of what can be done and what tools can be used. At the same time, I know there is enough capital also in Norway to finance the decarbonization. So I would be on the optimistic side, but I hear what you say about the relativity of the commitment. Just one thing to add about the broader European space is enlargement. So when we think about our target for 2040, we also need to look at the fact that probably it's not going to be the EU of 27, but it's likely to be an enlarged EU. Let's hope that we will not lose on the 27 side, but there are several countries who might become members of the EU, and we need to figure out how to calculate their contribution. And that's why we are also working already now with them in introducing ETS, in monitoring emissions, in thinking about carbon sinks, and if and when they become members of the EU, that they do their fair share as well.
Thanks very much. We are 1:45, but I understand you have 5 minutes for another round.
Thank you very much. I have a question about, well, I welcome so much how you stress, of course, science as the foundation also for the Commission proposal, also on the 2040 target. But if you look at the ESAP compared to the IPCC, the ESAP is much broader in its mandate, also more on policy. So that leads then to more normative observations by such a scientific board, such as fair share. And I wondered a little bit, it's just a reflection that if indeed so much emphasis is given to, well, the foundation is in ESAP on the 90% and the fair share, particularly that criterion, is actually perhaps also quite a normative criterion. So I wonder how, and we will see that in the Commission proposal, how this emphasis will be done on science, particularly when it is more normative, because we need to also have a debate in the Parliament, of course, and perhaps also in the wider society. So I would find it a bit dangerous to put it like that, to say very strictly, this is what science says, when it is a more normative criterion. Thank you very much. Just to see your reflection.
Great, thank you. So we're going to have a panel after you about justice, but I did want to ask you to reflect on that a little bit. And particularly what I'm interested in is that anything that is designed or implemented to increase justice for one location or one group of people is inevitably interpreted by others as being unjust. And so thinking about this from not just a global perspective, you know, developed and developing countries, but even within the EU and within member states, how do you think justice plays into this and making it harder or even making it easier in some ways?
Yeah, hi. I've been working on some of the outputs from GreenDeal-NET having to do with adaptation policy. So I was intrigued and encouraged to, I think, to hear your comments about how I think you may even have used the phrase new generation of legislation and climate resilience by design and a good buy-in from the member states. So having looked at this field for quite a few years, there was always an objection. Member states were always very wary of giving up too much power to the Commission. There was talk originally way back of an adaptation directive. People didn't think that was necessary. So what form of legislation are you referring to, and why are the member states more willing to counterbalance it from what you've stated in your really interesting talk? Thank you. Yeah.
And I just add what's online. It's a big basket, right? And wants to know about EU's diplomacy in the Mediterranean, and especially that the new pact on the Mediterranean initially refers only to energy and not climate change. Does the EU intend to influence energy producing exporting countries in the region regarding climate policies, probably expanding on your neighborhood point, and so that's also part of the basket. Whatever you manage in the time remaining, please, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you, and thanks for the questions. I'll be try to be concise. I think that the first two questions are actually related, and defining what is the fair share of the EU is depending whom you ask, you would get different answers. Embedded in the whole climate negotiations is the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities with respecting the different capacities. We have the whole great debate about what it means for obligations of countries like China in terms of mitigation on one hand, but climate finance on the other. I take your point that we need to quote science precisely, that we need to admit that there are sometimes when science meets policy, the policy does not always copy paste what the science says, but we should be honest about it. And I think that we are open to the criticism from the scientific world if we divert. There is a reason why you take a certain policy or political decision, but it should not. It would not be fair to say, well, this is exactly how the science told us to act. That relates to the topic of justice as well. How do we? I mean, one of my roles is sitting on the board of the new fund for responding to loss and damage, a global fund that should basically finance the responses. And there we are trying to sit together not as the developed versus developing, but as a group of 26 countries around the world, trying to define where we can allocate the resources, where it is most needed for not just the countries but also the communities, engaging the civil society, engaging the humanitarian actors, etc. So there is a lot of questions about justice. Definitely within the EU, the just transition and the role and possibilities of vulnerable parts of the population is something which is very important to look at. This is also why we have the Social Climate Fund that should primarily look at the disadvantaged parts of population to help with the transition. So eager to hear what where you see both on the European side and also on the global side where this can go further. In terms of the subsidiarity principle on adaptation, it's going to be a framework legislation. It's not going to be a detailed prescription. I mentioned the common reference temperature target that would help us to have the common understanding of the risks that we are facing in Europe, the mandate for the EU climate risk assessment going forward, the risk ownership in between the different players at the country level, but also having a common reference, and also the financing from the common European financing sources. So these are the things that will likely be in the new law. It's not gonna be it's not gonna be a very extensive one, but we feel the support for having the core principles established at the European level. Finally, on the Mediterranean. Definitely, this is an important region for us. Next week, I'm speaking at the Union for Mediterranean Green Week that is happening here in Brussels. So I'm eager also to see how that can contribute to the efforts. And as I said, our climate diplomacy is targeting the entire world, and we are working with other parts of the Commission and the External Action Service and the member states in pursuing that. We might see that the next host of the Conference of Parties might be Turkey. Let's see if it's Turkey or Australia, but if it is Turkey, then this is yet another angle.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks very much, Jan. Perhaps let's give him a hand. Thanks very much for joining us.